On that note, Rania, we want to turn for our first story here to the issue, one of the many ripple effects of what's happening with the genocide in Gaza, and that is the recent case, at the International Court of Justice filed by South Africa to stop this genocide. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show once again by Khulekani Skosana, who is a National Executive Committee member of the South Africa Youth Council. Khulekani, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, really, really great to have you here with us. And, I guess my first question for you is perhaps, why is it so important that South Africa took a step like this to go to the International Court of Justice and take on the Israeli regime there?
It is a new year, but not a happy one because 22,000 Palestinian citizens, women and children, innocent, will never get to see 2024. And their only crime is being born with the citizenship that is of Palestine. And as South Africa, we know this very well. My parents and all the Black people in South Africa, their crime was their ethnicity, their tribe. So Nelson Mandela, when he became president, he did not forget about other people who are being oppressed. And he said that the freedom of South Africa is not complete until Palestine is free from the river to the sea. And we think that it's important that we carry on the message of President Mandela by ensuring that not only do we retweet, but we take active decisions as a government to ensure that our support for the Palestinian people is significant and of value. And as a result, we don't start now. We did not start supporting the people of Palestine now. We started by fighting for their ousting from the African Union back in April. We have also been ensuring that our citizens in South Africa, and especially young people, economically boycott products from Israel. And we have been able to challenge all major outlets in South Africa not to buy products from Israel. We've also withdrawn our diplomats and our embassy from Tel Aviv, and the South African parliament has voted for the closure of the Israeli embassy in South Africa, as well as the suspension of diplomats here. So it's something that is historically important for us to stand on the right side of history, because we know how important international solidarity is when innocent lives are being lost. And we would like to shame and condemn the Israeli apartheid government and the Israeli killing machine, which is killing children and women, bombing schools, bombing hospitals, and claiming self-defense. And it's a Holocaust against the Palestinian people. And this is a position we're not about to move from. And we will not stop where we have gone. We will continue on every platform that the South African government and her people get. We will challenge Israel and any oppressor anywhere in the world.
The Israeli and American response to this 84-page report, which I must say is very well put together. It's meticulous documentation of Israel's crimes in Gaza before the ongoing genocide that we're witnessing and during. I mean, one thing that really struck me was 9 pages of this report are dedicated to laying out examples of senior Israeli officials making statements expressing genocidal intent. But of course, the U.S. reaction, I don't know if you saw yesterday, the spokesperson, John Kirby, called the report meritless and said it was counterproductive and just not true. And then, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu has called the report baseless, and other Israeli officials have said pretty ridiculous things, basically accusing South Africa of racism. But I'm just curious your response to the reaction of the Israelis and the Americans to this report. It seems like they're quite concerned that it could lead to some measure of accountability.
Well, we are not shocked, firstly, by the utterances of some of the representatives of the American government. It is not the first time they are on the wrong side of history. Mind you, the American government supported the South African apartheid government, and not only by supporting it in terms of public statements, but they gave them financial support, they gave them weapons, and we still defeated the South African apartheid government. just like the Palestinians will victor against the Israeli regime. Good will always win. The women and children who do not have guns will always victor over the killing machine which has weapons. And we are standing with the innocent civilians of Palestine. We are calling for a ceasefire, and we condemn any acts of violence against civilians, whether on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side. The only way to resolve disputes of this nature is through diplomatic talks. And that's why we're saying there must be a sit down and reconsideration of a two-state solution. But we cannot sit and watch when Palestine, since 1948, there have been resolutions in the United Nations, and the Israeli regime continues to brazenly shoot civilians without any response whatsoever from the world. So South Africa has taken that step to say that we will be among what started as a few, but now is a many uh, global citizens who are calling out the apartheid regime for its genocidal acts against the citizens of Gaza. We cannot watch while a killing machine eats away Palestinian land day by day and takes away the innocent lives of civilians in Palestine, in Gaza, and brazenly bombing them. And we just continue with our lives and wish each other a happy new year and Merry Christmas as if there are no crimes being committed against humanity. This is, as I said, a Holocaust. This is genocidal, and it needs to be condemned. And Netanyahu, the criminal warlord, needs to be put in handcuffs and thrown in the most strongest dungeon, because we need to set an example of world leaders who are given power and they abuse it and kill people as if there's nothing wrong with that. And this is the problem we have with one axis of power being dominant in the world. And that's why we've always called for a multipolar world where power can be balanced. Because if America is able to say we stand with Israel, then nothing gets to happen to Israel. Whoever that America stands with, they can commit whatever crimes they want. The people will victor, and South Africa is correct, and would like to commend our Minister Naledi Pandor, for standing strong and sacrificing her personal security at the expense of the threats that are being rendered against her, against the from the Zionists. And last point, we want to say, being anti the Israeli killing machine and the Israeli state is not being anti-Jewish. We work with Jewish people, we don't have a problem, but we cannot sit and watch when a state of Israel shamelessly kills people.
No, I think that's a tremendously good point, and quite frankly, a number of individuals from Joe Slovo to Andrew Feinstein today, and individuals with roots in the National Liberation Movement of South Africa, very prominent Jewish individuals who, of course, stand against Zionism. So I think that's a critically important point. And I guess I'm glad you brought up the issue of multipolarity, because it feels like both South Africa taking the case to the ICJ and also seeing countries around the world start to rally to it, start to support it, from Malaysia to Turkey to others, that this in and of itself could become an inflection point in the shift from a unipolar to a multipolar world, to see all these countries, many of which, including South Africa, have good relations with the United States, stand up and say, well, listen, we're not going to be dictated to, and the world is not just going to be taken along by the whims of one entity.
And we strongly encourage the rest of the world not to sit by and watch when crimes against humanity are being committed in Gaza, because today it can be Palestine, tomorrow it can be your country, just like we have had that experience as South Africa. And as victims of oppression and heinous killings and violations of international law, as we have experienced, we think that we must stand together as all the countries that have been oppressed by superpowers and call order on Israel. And we strongly call for the arrest, not only a ceasefire. We want Netanyahu in chains. He must be in chains. He must be arrested. 22,000 lives have been lost at the expense of this criminal state. So we strongly believe in the sentiments of President Mandela, who laid it clear to us already in 1994. That's almost 30 years ago. And he said that the freedom of South Africa is incomplete without the freedom of Palestine. So I've got a mandate from the founding president, the founding democratic president of South Africa, to ensure that I do not enjoy my New Year's and Christmas without standing strong in support of the people of Palestine, who today are being victimized, all because they are Palestinian citizens who are being killed wherever they run to. They run into a school, they are being killed. They run to hospitals, they are being killed in the hospital where they're supposed to get help. So we strongly support the motion by the South African government as the South African Youth Council, and many in our country, even Christian churches. The South African Board of Christian Churches has come out and said they do not support what Israel is doing. And Israel wants to use this religious standpoint to justify the killing of innocent citizens. We're happy that Christians all over the world have recognized what Israel is doing as genocide, and there's no justification whatsoever. You can bring any Bible that says, there's no Bible that says killing innocent people is correct. And Netanyahu must be in chains, and he must be thrown to the furthest dungeon in the world. And we are proud of President Ramaphosa for having had led the cabinet decision that said the Israeli must be taken to the International Court of Justice.
Well, you mentioned before some issues with like a backlash in terms of one of South Africa's officials. I'm curious, what has been so far, if any, reaction from the Israelis, from their various lobbying apparatuses, against officials in South Africa? We've seen on the international stage, there's been some very negative commentary from Israeli officials in terms of how they're framing South Africa. But we do know that they typically do, in response to any sort of measure of accountability from any institution or country, they do tend to launch these kinds of smear campaigns to lobby to get their way.
We are completely unshaken by any smear campaign. What would move us from our chairs is a South African government that sits and watches when people are being killed and oppressed just as in their innocent state. So we're unshaken. And smear campaigns and threats are a validation that we are doing the right thing. And whilst we're receiving smear campaigns, we're also receiving support. We are also supporting countries which are also expelling the Israeli diplomats and so on. We're not the only ones. And we are encouraging others to join us. And there's nothing that they can do to us that will move us from our position, because from where we are as a South African people, it took strength and resilience to fight the system for almost 100 years, and nobody believed us. And many today say it has been a long time since 1948 and there's no progress with the Palestinian struggle, and would like to say that the Palestinians must not despair, the Palestinians must not lose strength, because we know that at the end of the tunnel, it is victory for those who stand on the correct side of history. So we're not bothered by any slander or smear campaigns that threaten our leaders. We also have an army and security services that have ensured the safety of our officials, and would like to warn anybody that thinks they can come against our security forces that they might find something else. But we are people of peace, we are people of friendship, and we are still preaching that there must be a ceasefire and there must be talks, and we are still calling for a two-state solution. We are not calling for the extermination of what is the Israeli state, but we are strongly against what is actively happening, which is the extermination of the Palestinian state. Now they are making threats that they want to send them to Africa. What is Africa? Is Africa some dumping grounds? It's the same kind of commentary we had from the English government when they did not want people to migrate there. They said, no, we'll send them to Africa, because they know that they've been able to do whatever they want here in Africa for a long time, but not anymore. The American government cannot tell us what to do. Nobody can tell us what to do. Times have changed. We are governing, we're in charge, and it is not out of favor We defeated the system. We defeated the oppressor. And the Palestinians will defeat the oppressor, and they will defeat the killing machine, which is the Israeli apartheid state. So nothing has changed. History will repeat itself, and those who are oppressed will victor. That's why we encourage the Palestinians not to despair. As much as international communities everywhere around the world stood with us when it was difficult, when it was unfavorable, people and citizens of the world stood with South Africa, and we are standing with Palestine, because if we are to foster peace that is enshrined in the statutes of the United Nations, we must not only preach and make beautiful speeches, but we must take decisions. And that is what the South African government and her people have done by taking the Israeli apartheid state to the International Court of Justice, by withdrawing its diplomats from Tel Aviv, as well as by voting against for the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador in South Africa. And we want to say, those who are being bought by money of Israel to close their eyes, shame on you, because one day it shall be you, and others will be bought too. South Africa, with the threat of economic sabotage that the Israeli regime is threatening us with, we are unshaken. We are not moving. We stand with Palestine, and Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea.
Khulekani Skosana, National Executive Committee, member of the South Africa Youth Council. As always, thank you so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.